Loads of you have been enjoying our content on UFOs and extraterrestrials and recent leaks coming out of the Pentagon and US military. So I spoke to Jeremy Corbell, who's at the forefront of these recent revelations, and I asked him, aside from the incredible technological miracles around the propulsion of these vehicles, what are the spiritual, ontological and philosophical connotations of these recent revelations? What does it mean? Here's my conversation with Jeremy Corbell from my podcast Under the Skin, which you can listen to in its entirety on Luminary. This is what he had to say about the implications.
With this problem of technology and consciousness, this is where I think we can have a unique discussion. It is a fact that human consciousness can affect machinery. This is something that has been proven, and I don't want to repeat it to you, but you know about it from the Princeton Anomalies Research Laboratory, random number generators, this sort of thing. Everybody knows about these, or they just have Google at the tips of their fingers. They'll figure it out.
Obviously, this is a subject that requires further research because it's fascinating. Human consciousness can affect machinery. So where Jeremy's going straight away is we're dealing with an advanced technology where consciousness itself can be utilized to control high-tech, presumably alien machinery. Jeremy goes deeper into the subject. Of course, one of his main sources, and the source that led to him being in the public eye, was Bob Lazar, who worked at high-level American institutes, was given access to extraterrestrial machinery, and talks about this stuff in a kind of nerd way of, hold on, that's not possible, you can't bend gravity, you can't use gravity as an energy. Now, these things are fascinating, but my particular area of interest is, what does that mean about the great philosophical questions that we as human beings continually find ourselves reflecting on? Are we alone in the universe? What is the nature of God? How did life on Earth begin? Where do certain cultural ideas come from? For me, I suppose the primary thing it inspires in me is the idea that we are looking at how to organize life here on this planet in accordance with a really limited set of principles and ideas based on our limited understanding of economics and ecology, all of which could be sort of radically reimagined once you start envisaging, even though in a weird way it's kind of abstract, we should run society differently anyway, whether there's aliens or no aliens. We should have a fairer world that is more rational and logical and respectful and loving and isn't governed by sort of weird, balmy, imaginary concepts like profit. That's the sum total of human endeavor, is to mobilize every living creature into the use and service of a pre-existing system. So for me, what Jeremy Corbell is bringing to public knowledge and what the implications of these discoveries are is that we're only living within a limited fragment of all possible worlds, that we're not experiencing reality in the way that we could, not just because it would be more loving and kind, man, but because this isn't true, this isn't real. We're living under a false set of assumptions.
So here's the deal. If consciousness can affect physical machinery, and the mechanics of that doesn't really matter, we don't got to go into it, but it works, it happens. The way I understand these craft to operate, there is a connectivity between the consciousness of the operator as well as the machines themselves. And that seems so far out until you really start back engineering the idea of how that works. We are getting closer to that. Your cell phone is an extension of your body. Your eye movement can now be tracked by machines. I mean, once you bridge that gap between what the mind is thinking and how the machinery around you operate, that's what we're seeing in this advanced technology.
Some people, I suppose, will therefore say, oh, well, if we're quite close to realizing these things, then perhaps it is an advanced human technology. That's something that Jeremy didn't seem to think was possible, and even alluded to the idea that there might be further evidence that puts that beyond the bounds of possibility. And the eagerness, I think, to sort of the further to just, no, it's human, it's Chinese, it's Russian. Well, what does that tell you? That's a bias. That's a set of biases. No, I don't want it to be that. Why? Why not? And of course, the added value of suggesting that it could somehow be Chinese or Russian underwrites ongoing militarization and expenditure on what is called defense, but is really attack. And it also has a sort of great deal of ontological freight as well, to consider that humanity's place in the broader spectrum of life is not a pinnacle experience, just one of many forms of consciousness, which for me seems spiritually enriching. But I think for certain ideological teleologies or teloses, that is a difficult challenge. It interrupts human progress and human agenda, or at least the agenda of existing systems.
And our military that has been exploiting these technologies for decades, they do know how these machines operate. And remember, propulsion is one aspect. If you can generate gravity, if you can amplify a wave of gravity, then everything changes. The technology of the propulsion system has effects temporally. It has effects from a national security and weapons system. It has effects of travel. Everything in science fiction becomes science fact once we can duplicate it. However, the programs, from my informed understanding, is that the limiting factor has always been the material science. It doesn't break the laws of physics as we know them, but the actual materials to create these amplification machines, the fuel source, we are fundamentally limited because of our ability to basically stack atoms. It's our ability to create metamaterials where there's perfect harmony between each level with very slight alteration in angle, as well as when you fabricate something, gravity itself has an effect on the structure. We now know metamaterials have unique properties because they're layered perfectly atomically. But if those atoms even have a little bit of gravity in their production, it changes the orientation of the layering. So not to get too weird about it, but that is the limiting factor, is the replication of material science as far as I know at this time. So it's kind of neat. Like, we got some toys, but we don't really got the keys to them.
Another thing that people say, of course, is that these revelations are being used to distract people from the kind of Machiavellian activity of global superpowers during this very peculiar political time. And of course, anybody that mistrusts power would certainly have to entertain that possibility. But according to Jeremy, the reason this is happening now is because there are revelations coming from sources that are beyond government control, or are at least anonymous and are unable to be prevented. So this is not happening, according to Jeremy, as a result of government or agency will, but at odds with their will and contrary to it, which for me gives more legitimacy to the claims that are being made around them, although the veracity of the footage, for example, speaks for itself.
It's not coming from the military. And that's what's so great. You know, I've obtained and released numerous videos. You know, obviously I have good sources. I make sure not to put out anything, you know, classified, because my intent is not to harm the structure of secrecy. Something should be kept secret, you know, as they're figured out. However, what we're seeing is the will of the people on representative government, and then representative government finally picking up the things that we are putting down and pushing forward to penetrate these boundaries that the average citizen can't get into, which is these halls of government that actually make policy change on the concepts that we all relate to. You know, money is a concept. Well, so is UFOs. This is a war of ideas. And this idea that we finally have people paying attention who are beholden to us, from our intelligence agencies to our Congress and Senate and the Senate Intelligence Committee, asking for this report coming out, you know, this month. For me, it's very hopeful. You know, look, government should work for us. They do. And so if it goes the other way, we're in big trouble. So all I'm seeing is that things are working the way that they should work. The lies are done. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, as they say. There are too many people, you know, in the 50s and the 60s, where there's moments where there was this touch to try to expose a little of this, all the way up to the Clintons. And everybody was stymied the whole way through. And there are attempts to do that now, I'll tell you that. But it's the will of the people. I'm bringing stuff out. I'm not the government. I'm bringing stuff out to shake the trees, to try to make sure that as this report comes closer, that our will is clearly defined. You got to ask a question to get an answer. So hopefully some of what I put out will be addressed in these reports coming. But essentially, I think the biggest point of this is that this is not the government playing marionette to human awareness and consciousness. It's quite the reverse. The population of civilian population, we are playing marionette with our own government.
It really was a fascinating conversation with Jeremy about a subject that challenges our preconceptions about how we should regard reality, and indeed which subjects are politically relevant and where they exist within the kind of window of what's plausible to discuss. Comparable, I suppose, to some of the subjects that were regarded as conspiratorial, perhaps around the pandemic, even 6 months ago, that are now beginning to be discussed in a more, rational and evidence-based way. And I think perhaps that the whole subject of extraterrestrials and UFO and the phenomena around it may be entering the mainstream in a similar way, but certainly it's a very interesting subject to contemplate, and it's a brilliant conversation. If you're not a subscriber to Luminary, you should subscribe now. You can get it for as little as 28 quid a year, and there's loads of fantastic podcasts on there, not least Dave Chappelle's new podcast, which is bloody amazing. So go over and subscribe to that now. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think about the subject of UFOs. Is it just a distraction? Do you feel that we've addressed the subjects there? Let me know what you think. We'll investigate it more. Sign up to my mailing list on russellbrand.com so that you can come and see me live. I'm doing some live stuff in the UK in the later part of this year. Thanks very much for watching.